Hello, I'm Stephen Clarke. I'm a musician and I owe a huge debt to New College Choir for really my career as a musician. So I was a church musician originally, so organ scholar as a youngster and conducted choirs before spending most of my career in the opera house, often the pit, but also coaching. So coaching and conducting and administering music departments has been mostly what it's been. I had a spell out running music at Radley College, but I'm now back as a member of music staff at Covent Garden, or I would be if it wasn't for the current situation, sadly, and I'm not sure when that's going to change, but we look on the bright side. So having lived in London, Glasgow and Israel, I'm now living back in North Oxford, back to my roots really, and we're very lucky to live in North Oxford, and we're back onto a lake, so we have a chance to do lots of swimming to keep ourselves sane in this period of lockdown. So I've got huge connections with New College. First of all, I was a chorister under David Lumsden, one of his last choristers, although all my early training was with him, and then the interregnum, and then I was one of Edward Higginbotham's first choristers. I was married in the chapel. My late wife Helen's father was a student there. Both my children were christened there, and I've also conducted the midnight mass service there in the early years of that service, and increasingly we got alumni involved, and that was a huge pleasure. My son Matthew was a chorister, so I've also been a chorister parent, and when my wife got ill, Edward and Caroline were both hugely supportive. Matthew was still a chorister then. Caroline particularly kept in very, very close touch with Helen, and I know how much she appreciated that, so I owe them huge debt. And the boys came and sang at her funeral, which was just perfect. So a huge musical and emotional attachment to not only the choir but the chapel for me. My early experience of boarding at New College and singing in the choir was formative in so many ways that only really become apparent with the benefit of hindsight. For years hindsight, you realise the things that you learnt at that young age, the total immersion in music making of the English tradition, not only the repertoire and the routine, but also that particular kind of choir training. And it was completely formative for me. So I've been able to follow the fortunes of the choir for many, many more years than most people have the opportunity to, and for that I'm very grateful. So it's very hard to choose one moment, but I look backward to my days as a chorister under David Lumsden, and it was a time that I really felt confident to lead as a performer for the very first time, and that's something that's been important as a conductor in my career. It was the first time I had been trusted with a corner position. It was the organ end of Can, I remember, and it was the longest psalm that is sung once all the way through in one evensong, Psalm 78. You might think it strange to have chosen a psalm, but if you remember, Psalm 78 is like no other psalm. It has a wonderful ebb and flow of narrative through 72 verses detailing the fortunes of the men of Ephraim. I didn't remember that one, I had to look it up. So each twist of the plot travels through wonderful different chants from major to minor, different twists and turns of the story being echoed by the music. And in that service I felt for the first time a confidence and enjoyment, as well as a control and power of my voice to make a difference to the ensemble, and that kind of moment of arrival as a performer I've never forgotten. I must have been 9 or 10, I suppose, or maybe 11. We looked up hugely to David Lumsden. He had such a magical way with the choir and the sound. Another memory I shall never forget was the moment that he told us immediately after the vestry prayer, after evensong, that he would be leaving. That young and impressionable age, it seemed my entire universe was folding up. It was like the world had collapsed or something. Couldn't quite comprehend fully what he was telling us. The interregnum with David Woolston was an interesting time too, soon to be followed by the arrival of the young Higginbotham Cambridge, complete with his old-fashioned golden pocket watch he would place on the piano in the songroom. It was just the beginning of the new era, which my son was to become a part of too. So, as Psalm 78 doesn't appear on the discography, and I wonder whether it would be a popular choice without the atmosphere, smells and ambience of the building itself, but I've chosen something that still conjures up for me that feeling of performing in the chapel as a young boy. The Britain Missa Brevis always caused huge excitement amongst the boys when we knew it was approaching. There's something amazing about the way Britain understands about writing for young minds. The joy of the chase between the parts, or perhaps the wonderful feeling of being embedded in complex and moving harmonies, especially if you're singing the middle part. When I started with my own chorusship scheme at Radley College, it was not long before the boys there immediately took to it in exactly the same way. There's just something about it. A wonderful variety of moods and forms within the mass, from the energetic Gloria, completely wired and very kind of almost chaotic, chromatic Sanctus, and the spooky Anya's Day. So, please enjoy.